I handed in my resignation with a trembling hand, the letter feeling heavier than any report I'd ever filed. He looked up from his desk, that same smug grin plastered across his face, the one that had haunted me for years. "You're quitting?" He laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive, like a blade cutting through my chest. I tried to keep my voice steady, but there was a tremor I couldn't hide. "Yes," I said, each syllable deliberate, carrying the weight of every unnoticed effort, every late night, every time I'd swallowed my pride for the sake of this company. His laughter only grew, echoing off the sterile walls, a sound meant to humiliate and belittle. I had expected him to underestimate me. Everyone did. But it still stung, sharper than I wanted to admit. My hands clenched into fists, but I kept my posture calm, a mask of composure hiding the storm inside. This wasn't just a professional dismissal. It was personal. Years of being overlooked, ignored, and dismissed by a man who thought his power could define my worth had led to this moment. I felt the familiar tension coil in my chest, a mixture of resentment and exhilaration, knowing that I had finally stepped away from his shadow. Family gatherings had mirrored this dynamic for years, his smirk, his condescending tone. But here, in the heart of the office, it stung with the added bite of public judgment. I left the office, but I wasn't done yet. I remember the first project I poured my heart into, staying late night after night while he praised the least involved team members. Every spreadsheet I perfected, every presentation I rehearsed until it was flawless, went unnoticed, my contributions swallowed by his need to shine. I carried the weight of the company's smallest details, double-checking contracts, calming clients, and fixing problems no one else even knew existed, yet the credit always went elsewhere. It wasn't just work. It was an emotional labor I bore silently, smoothing egos, absorbing criticism, and tiptoeing around his moods, all while my own voice was muted. I often lay awake, questioning my choices, asking myself why I kept giving when recognition was a foreign concept. My family had long conditioned me to accommodate, to defer, to sacrifice quietly, and I realized the same pattern had followed me here. Every nod to a colleague, every thank you I withheld, became a small rebellion I could barely claim. The frustration grew into a simmering anger, a storm I hid behind smiles and nods. I longed for respect, for acknowledgement that I was more than just a tool for someone else's glory. My thoughts often wandered to what might have been if I had spoken up, demanded fairness, or walked away years earlier. Yet I stayed, tied to loyalty, hope, and an unspoken belief that my work mattered. Deep down, I knew the truth. No one would ever see my sacrifices unless I made them undeniable. It happened during the quarterly meeting, the one I had prepared for over 2 weeks. Every slide polished, every statistic double-checked. I stood at the front of the room, voice steady but heart hammering, ready to present solutions I knew would save the project and impress the board. But before I could even begin, he interrupted me with a laugh, cutting through my confidence like a knife. "Oh, you did this? Interesting, but let's hear what Mark has to say," he sneered, gesturing to a colleague who had barely contributed. The room chuckled politely, and I felt my face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and fury. I tried to continue, but he mocked every word, twisting my ideas into something foolish, undermining me in front of everyone I respected. It wasn't the first time he had belittled me, but this time it felt final. An unmistakable signal that all my efforts, my late nights, my sacrifices, had meant nothing. I looked around the room and realized no one intervened. Smiles and nods masked apathy or complicity. That familiar betrayal stung deeper than any criticism, a raw wound of hopelessness that had been building for years. Anger surged through me, hot and undeniable, and with it came the icy clarity that I couldn't stay in a place where my value was invisible. The resignation had been a thought before, but now it became an urgent necessity. I could no longer endure being publicly humiliated, dismissed, and treated as expendable. Every fiber of my being screamed that I deserved better, that my worth was mine to claim, and no one's laughter could take that from me. That day, in that room, I finally understood that leaving wasn't running away. It was reclaiming myself. The moment I stepped out of his office, a strange calm settled over me, but beneath it, a fire burned hotter than ever. I knew walking away wasn't enough. Leaving silently would only let him keep thinking he had won. That's when the idea came. A letter, precise, unflinching, a document that would reveal everything he never cared to see. I sat at my kitchen table that night, pen in hand, staring at a blank page that felt heavier than any resignation letter I had ever written. Every word had to count, every line a careful balance of truth and subtle exposure. I drafted, erased, and rewrote, remembering every slight, every dismissal, every moment he had laughed at my expense. He thought I was gone forever, but he had no idea that what I was crafting would strip his smugness away piece by piece. I outlined each paragraph, planned the order, and considered the exact timing of its delivery. It wasn't just a letter, it was a map of justice, a mirror reflecting his arrogance, and a key to reclaiming my dignity. The anticipation twisted inside me, equal parts fear and thrill, knowing that with each carefully chosen word, the tables would turn in ways he could never imagine. No one ever noticed the risks I took behind the scenes, the late nights spent uncovering errors that could have cost the company thousands, the quiet interventions that kept clients loyal and crises from erupting. While he basked in public praise, I carried the weight of responsibility no one acknowledged. I had even quietly purchased shares in the company years ago, using money saved from overtime and sacrifices no one knew about, slowly building a stake that would one day give me leverage he never suspected. Everyone saw me as the timid, agreeable worker, the one who followed orders without complaint, the one who would quietly disappear if needed. But the reality was far different. I had been preparing my own safety net, amassing proof of competence and ownership that contrasted sharply with the image he and the rest of the world had of me. The tension between perception and truth grew heavier each day, a secret power brewing under his nose while he continued to underestimate me. It was intoxicating to realize that the person everyone dismissed as weak held more control than anyone imagined. Every laugh he had ever directed at me now felt like fuel, igniting a quiet but relentless plan to finally reveal the full truth. I sat alone in my apartment, the quiet punctuated only by the scratch of my pen against paper, each word deliberate, each sentence a carefully measured strike. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to unleash. I reread every line, considering how he would react, imagining the shift in his expression as he realized the depth of what he had ignored. Every memory of dismissal, every laugh at my expense, every slight I had endured poured onto the page. I chose my words with surgical precision, firm but controlled, cutting without hysteria. I wanted him to understand, to feel the sting of the reality he had overlooked for so long. By the time he read this, nothing would be the same. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. My internal monologue swung between fear and exhilaration, questioning if I was cruel or justified, but deep down I knew this was necessary. I paused, rereading a paragraph exposing his arrogance, relishing the anticipation of his eventual shock. Each sentence was a mirror reflecting his ignorance and my resilience, a blend of vindication, truth, and silent triumph. As I finished the final line, I folded the letter carefully, sealing not just paper, but years of overlooked effort and unacknowledged power, knowing it carried the capacity to upend everything he thought he controlled. The next morning, I handed the letter to his assistant with a casual smile, making it seem like any ordinary correspondence. He had no idea it contained years of buried truths, no inkling that his smug sense of control was about to be shattered. As I walked away, I forced myself to appear nonchalant, but my heart raced with anticipation, each step heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. I pictured him sitting at his desk, curious at first, glancing at the envelope, expecting routine or praise, completely unaware of the storm waiting inside. I replayed every moment of my planning in my head, every word chosen to pierce through his arrogance, every subtle detail meant to unravel his assumptions. The suspense gnawed at me. I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before the weight of the letter hit him. Would he laugh at first, thinking it another harmless complaint, before realization dawned? I imagined his expression changing, the gradual shift from amusement to disbelief, then to horror. The office, the meetings, the countless times I had been overlooked, all led to this single moment. He opened it, smiled at first, then froze. He held the letter between his hands, initially glancing at it with the same dismissive curiosity he had shown me countless times before. At first, a small smirk formed on his face, like he was expecting another complaint he could easily dismiss. But as his eyes moved across the first paragraph, the amusement faltered, replaced by a subtle tightening of his jaw. His fingers trembled slightly as he continued, each sentence revealing layers of his own negligence and arrogance, truths he had never considered. I could almost see him shrink inwardly, caught between disbelief and the creeping shame that only comes when your carefully constructed self-image is dismantled piece by piece. In his office, alone with the paper, his reactions were private, intimate, and telling, an emotional unraveling no one else would witness yet. But when colleagues glanced over, sensing the tension in the room, his posture stiffened, and a flush of embarrassment crossed his face. He had been the master of appearances, always in control. But now the contrast between how he saw himself and the reality before him was undeniable. Every carefully hidden achievement, every unnoticed effort of mine was laid bare, exposing the arrogance that had allowed him to belittle and dismiss me for so long. His shock grew, shifting from private realization to a quiet, visible panic, and I felt a surge of quiet vindication knowing he could no longer ignore the truth. As he read further, the full weight of the letter began to sink in. I had meticulously detailed every instance of favoritism he had shown, every lie he had told to maintain his facade, every moment of betrayal that had chipped away at my confidence over the years. The words I had carefully chosen struck with precision, exposing not only his hypocrisy, but also the patterns he had assumed were invisible. I could imagine his throat tightening, a shiver running down his spine, as realization dawned that his power had always been conditional on others' ignorance. I, the one he had dismissed, the one he had laughed at, was now standing morally and emotionally above him. The contrast was intoxicating. For years I had been the submissive, overlooked presence. Now I held the clarity, the evidence, and the truth. Every line triggered memories he could not escape, moments where his arrogance had masked injustice, now illuminated by my words. I imagined viewers reading this with me, feeling the slow, satisfying build of justice, the thrill of seeing someone rise above neglect and humiliation. My hand shook slightly as I pictured his reaction, silent, internal, and irreversible. The letter wasn't just a confession or a complaint. It was a mirror reflecting everything he had failed to acknowledge, a reckoning that demanded acknowledgement, if not remorse. By the end, he was trapped not by physical confrontation, but by the undeniable moral high ground I now occupied, a triumph built on patience, strategy, and years of hidden resilience. The next day, he called me into his office, and for the first time in years, I walked in with my head held high, unshaken by his usual smirk. He was silent at first, shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact, the weight of the letter hanging between us like a storm cloud. Then he spoke, voice tight, almost hesitant. I didn't realize... His words faltered, searching for an excuse, a way to reclaim the control he had long assumed was his. I remained calm, letting the pause stretch, letting him feel the imbalance, the reversal of power that had taken years to engineer in a single letter. I recounted a few key points quietly but firmly, reminding him of decisions, favoritism, and lies he had spun, watching his posture shrink with each acknowledgement. Colleagues passing by the open door sensed the tension, whispering, witnessing the shift in authority. He was no longer the untouchable figure, and I was no longer invisible. The status tension peaked. The underestimated worker, the one he had dismissed as timid and inconsequential, now controlled the narrative. Every nod, every subtle gesture of his admission reinforced the reversal. I could feel the satisfaction rising in my chest, not just for myself, but for the quiet justice unfolding, a moral victory as tangible as any professional accolade. He had to confront the truth, and in doing so, he validated every ounce of effort I had poured into building this moment of reckoning. Sitting alone that evening, I finally allowed myself to breathe, the tension that had gripped me for years slowly loosening. The letter had done its work. The confrontation had shifted the balance. And for the first time, I felt the quiet satisfaction of true vindication. Yet, amid the relief, there was a subtle ache. Family dynamics are rarely neat, and the wounds of favoritism and betrayal do not disappear overnight. I thought about the long nights I had sacrificed, the patience it took to plan each step, and the strength I had uncovered in myself along the way. I realized that dignity was not something anyone could give me. It was something I had claimed, piece by piece, through persistence and courage. Inner peace came from knowing that I had acted with integrity, that my actions were deliberate and justified. Still, the tension lingered, subtle and complex, a reminder that some relationships cannot be fully repaired. Even so, the contrast between the powerless version of myself from years past and the present, confident and recognized self, was undeniable. I had transformed frustration and neglect into clarity and authority, proving not just to him, but to myself that I was no longer anyone's shadow. In the weeks that followed, the ripples of the letter spread farther than I had imagined. Colleagues whispered in hallways, exchanging incredulous glances, and even casual acquaintances began treating him with a newfound caution, aware of the truths I had laid bare. Invitations he once took for granted dwindled, his influence subtly eroding as the contrast between perception and reality became undeniable. He avoided eye contact in meetings, a shadow of the arrogant figure he once was, and I could almost feel the weight of his regret pressing down, heavy and suffocating. Meanwhile, my own path continued to rise steadily, quietly, yet unmistakably. Opportunities I had been denied before now came within reach, as people began to see the competence and resilience they had previously overlooked. Each success was a reminder not just of my professional skill, but of the personal strength I had cultivated through years of struggle and meticulous planning. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, I felt fully empowered, recognized, respected, and in control of my own story. The satisfaction of watching someone who once belittled me face consequences, while I continued to grow, was subtle yet infinitely sweet, a lasting testament to patience, strategy, and self-worth. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's that justice doesn't always come loud or immediate. It often comes quietly, from the patience, courage, and self-respect you cultivate while the world underestimates you. Never let anyone convince you that your contributions, your integrity, or your presence are insignificant. Stand firm, even when overlooked. And remember that every act of diligence and every ounce of restraint builds the foundation for your eventual vindication. The letter, the confrontation, the slow dismantling of arrogance. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake, but about claiming the dignity and recognition that had been denied to me for far too long. And here's the twist. He never saw it coming, but that letter wasn't just a reckoning for him. It became a blueprint for my own life, proof that I could assert control over my story, my worth, and my future. To anyone watching this, know that strength often grows in the shadows, unnoticed, and when it finally emerges, it can change everything. Courage isn't loud, it's deliberate, calculated and transformative. Looking back, I see how every slight, every laugh, every moment of being dismissed shaped me into someone I barely recognized at first, a version stronger, wiser, and unshakable. If there's a lesson in my story, it's this. Don't let anyone underestimate you, and don't let their arrogance define your worth. Your efforts, your patience, and your quiet resilience are building something far greater than they can see. Sometimes the world doesn't notice until the right moment arrives, and when it does, the impact can be astonishing. Remember, power isn't just about money or status. It's about self-respect, moral clarity, and the courage to act when the time is right. Your moment will come, often when least expected, and it will be yours to claim. Hold on to that truth, cultivate your strength quietly, and let life reveal the transformation only patience and strategy can achieve. When it finally unfolds, the satisfaction isn't just personal. It resonates with everyone who has ever been overlooked or dismissed, leaving a lingering sense of awe at what one person can achieve when they refuse to be invisible.